products, not just the product of alcohol, and then go on to say, and products and brands that give preference to advertising which supports health and healthy lifestyle choices. Now, I'll leave it at that, and maybe we can hear from Mr. Helgard on that, but I understand that is the direction that Auckland Transport has confirmed. And rather than us be responding in an ad hoc way when an issue of, let's just say, sugar or some food additive comes up, that we give scope through proper policy rather than reacting. Can we have some feedback on my recommendation?
Just hang on, Helgard. And it's great to see you all here. So we'll just take them, note them, and once we've been through any other comments, I've got Councillor Cathy next, then we'll get Helgard up and we'll just sort of knock them off one at a time.
Mr Mayor, the change in policy made by Auckland Transport is welcomed by me. It was prompted by a photograph I took at a bus stop in Avondale. One of a zillion. A bus stop in Avondale where there was some young school children sitting in the bus shelter advertising gambling. And like Councillor Darby, I would wish to see, that's what prompted the change to Auckland Transport. So they then took on gambling and alcohol. So I would like the word gambling to be inserted there too. So that was what prompted it.
Okay, all right, so there's a couple of suggestions here, and I guess mindful of the fact that this has been quite a long process, I first of all want to understand from the hearings panel as to whether either of these matters were raised, and if they were, what was the general context of the discussion, and if they weren't, what their view is, just to sort of get us moving off in the right direction, and then we'll probably get Helgard up and ask him for his view generally on those two matters. So, Councillor George, either of those matters raised?
Well, in relation to the substances or food issues raised by Councillor Darby, I'm not aware of that coming up in the submissions. I was actually talking to Councillor, I heard Councillor talking about, is it alcohol?
Gambling.
Oh, gambling. Oh, well, no, gambling didn't come up. I'm not aware of that coming up in the submissions. And I do think that we have a difficulty, from my point of view, and I think from the committees, to change things markedly at this stage when it hasn't been part of the submissions, because we've only heard the submissions and deliberated on what we've heard. So I don't think we can start that, but Mr Wagner or the legal people can talk about that more. But yeah. I think for us to now at this late stage start modifying things, it would have to go back to the panel, because I'm only one of the panel. But Mr Wagner.
Okay, and Councillor Cole, do you want to speak too at this point, or?
I concur, Your Worship, in relation to what Councillor Wood has said there, and at no time did that come up through the process, and I'm happy where we've landed. Changing that the last hour and the hour to me would be the wrong decision to make, so I'm comfortable with the recommendations as they stand.
Okay, right now I've got that. Now I want Helgard, would you like to just come up and reflect a little bit on what has been proposed?
Your Worship, the particular situation that Auckland Transport has a policy in place that enables it to refuse to accept advertisements on the infrastructure that it controls that relates to health and a number of other issues, healthy lifestyle, etc. Within the hearings panel environment, the major ones were raised as alcohol, particularly by the local boards, and but one particular submitter, the Auckland Regional Health Service, had raised the issue of sugary food. No mention had been made of gambling. The request or the eventual decision had been that staff be requested to develop a policy and similar to the Auckland Transport policy and present it to the Regulatories and Bylaws Committee for its consideration. Part of that particular debate had been around issues such as the advertising of alcohol, for example, on umbrellas, etc., that you may find at restaurants in something like Waterfront, etc., that has to be considered. But so the door is open, I think partly on the basis of the fact that the deliberation had been around something similar to Auckland Transport, but that is obviously up to yourselves to decide whether you want to go beyond the alcohol into following Auckland Transport's example, or to restrict it to what's currently in front of you.
Okay, so what you're saying is that it wouldn't be unreasonable for us if we decided to incorporate what is being proposed here today.
Particularly the Auckland Transport example was held up as worthwhile following.
Okay. All right, well, Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The point I would make is that paragraph 57 reads that Auckland Council investigate adopting an equivalent advertising policy that of Auckland Transport, which could potentially look at some of the areas that Councillor Darby or Councillor Casey are bringing forward. I don't think it would be appropriate in this forum to put in issues at this late stage of the event, and also where, and carrying that argument on a touch, where do you draw the line? What's healthy and what's not, and in whose opinion? So we need to have some science and even direction from central government around these sort of guidances. It's a more of a national issue rather than one that could be taken by this council in an ad hoc provision.
Okay, that sounds reasonably good common sense. And so the idea, what has been proposed here, is something more of a policy discussion that in due course could be added to the bylaw on the basis that it had been through something of a policy and political filter. That's what you are proposing. And that would probably not compromise either the directions, I think, that are being proposed here, and would give us a chance to chew over the meat on the bone a bit more. Councillor Chris and Councillor Kathy, I would have thought that's a sensible way to go forward.
You're saying the sensible way forward is to support the D with the amendments, considering that it is mentioned in 56 and 57, and it does not change the adoption of this signage bylaw. So I take the points of the three panel members who are concerned about this late stage, but at this late stage, no change is proposed to the bylaw itself. The recommendation is that we undertake, exactly as Councillor Cashmore requests, a deeper interrogation of this matter. The signage bylaw is done and dusted. If we confirm it now, I think we will.
Yep. And
we proceed with some other work beyond the scope of beyond the initial scope of the bylaw.
Okay, so hang on, councillors. So just look at D. All right, so what has been suggested by Helgard, and I think what Bill was talking about is the need for some specific policy work on those issues that have been asked for by your two colleagues. So it says, direct the manager, social policy and bylaws, to report to the Regulatory and Bylaws Committee on a policy for advertising of alcohol brands, products, brand blah blah, which supports health and healthy lifestyle choices and gambling on infrastructure, facilities or services. So what that does is provide the basis for a discussion. It doesn't decide a policy, and secondly, it provides the opportunity for a discussion. Now, if you don't want the discussion, you'll vote against it. But if you are happy to have that discussion without any indication as to what you think should be the outcome of that, it doesn't impact on the bylaw that is being proposed here today, so I get that. So I would have thought that if you were looking for a more of a discussion on these two items, and remember one of them is by and large incorporated by AT already in its sign policy, then without it compromising the view that you might have, at least you'd have the information at hand if you didn't want to support it, or secondly, if you did, it'll give you a little bit more of an affirmation. So, councillors, I don't think that it should be seen as something that one, you've been bound by today,